Hi folks, welcome. Thank you for coming out today and joining us here at the Lime Art Association. This is a part of our weekend matinee series. My name is Paul Michael. I'm the gallery manager here, and it's wonderful to have you. We are joined here today with Harley Bartlett, who's an elected artist here. Bartlett is an accomplished painter and muralist based in Rhode Island. His paintings may be found in institutions such as the New England Institute of Technology, Newport Hospital, and the Bryant University, just to name a few. His work has been featured in many articles and publications, such as the American Artist magazine, Florida Architecture, Traditional Home magazine, Home Gallery, and recently the Soundings magazine. He is the past president of the Providence Art Club, one of the oldest art clubs in the United States, and additionally has served as board members and secretary. In 2020, he was elected to serve as the president of the Lime Art Association here, and where he's also served as a board member, and as I mentioned earlier, he's an elected artist. In 2015, he was voted as an elected member at the Guild of Boston Artists, and currently serves on the board. He is currently also the president of the Rockport Art Association. And lastly, he's a past member of the Copley Society, National Society of Mural Painters, and the New England Plein Air Painters Group. Now it's my pleasure to introduce Harley Bartlett.
Thank you for coming. I'm known primarily as an easel painter, creating framed paintings, selling to galleries, but I've had a parallel career in the commercial arena, painting murals of all kinds, both, as you're seeing here, large murals. I now do a lot of art on demand for designers, design firms that go into country clubs, restaurants, and that sort of situation. This was designed by the artist Richard Haas out of New York City, and I was hired to be the pictorial muralist. In this, as you can see on the left, that's the before picture of the building, on the right is the after. There was a substantial amount of brickwork to do, and we had a whole crew that was undertaking that endeavor. My role was to, again, facilitate the creation or getting all of the artwork on the wall. I'm starting with this because typically the first reaction after people get beyond the trompe l'oeil or visual trick of the eye aspect is like, how did you do that? And that's going to be a good part of this lecture, explaining how, or the process. We might have some artists here, and artists typically are process nerds, because most art demands that you have a certain process. And in this type of endeavor, process is absolute. You have to have, you start with a sketch that's to scale, then you translate that into large transfer patterns, and and this is a very common or a traditional means. We use pounces, which is we take typically 4x8 sheets of paper. We project the portions of the design, which has been gridded out, onto the paper and draw it in charcoal, and then with a pounce machine, burn holes in that design. And then we can take them up to the wall at their appropriate place, roll them out, and take a big rag filled with charcoal powder, dust it out, and you've got little dots on the wall, which translate, you take down a charcoal stick and you draw it out. So this gives you a little bit better detail of that same wall. And it's pretty convincing. The fact that that archway is completely flat on this wall, the only real thing is that series of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 windows. The windows on the right side are fake. All of the architectural work is painted, and it's obviously to create the illusion of depth. This is the other wall. One thing fascinating with the artist Richard Haas, which I was pretty impressed with, is this is Lewis and Clark, the man in New York, Sacagawea, and I forget what the dog's name was. Started out as a small dog, and then he learned it was a Newfoundland. Boy, we have a challenge getting that into the design. The interesting fact here is this was the first project I had ever done of this size. I had no experience of doing this type of endeavor. I interviewed with Richard Haas, and I was pretty honest with him. I said, I've never done this. Do you have something going on, or are you trying it out? He did like what he saw in my portfolio, and I seemed to have the skill set, and I learned quickly on the job how to get things going. This was another project later, about 10 years after, in Rock Island. That's Black Hawk Indian. This is paying homage to Black Hawk. And again, same thing. That is all illusionary in as much as the Indian goes and the niche that he's in. They did accommodate for the roundness of the barrel vault, whatever we'll call it. They had to make a projection up at the roof to allow for that to take place, so as to suggest a curvature. Otherwise, it just would have cropped off and not been convincing. So that's, again, same type of process. Working from a scale rendering, working it up to paper patterns, transferring them to the wall, and then beginning the painting process. This was another project in the Rhode Island State House. I painted the clouds. This was about 1989. This project facilitated a relationship with the painting company, the E.F. O'Donnell and Son painting company from Providence. They did a lot of historic work, and the son of the two brothers who the company was founded in the 1850s. The son, who's my age, had bought them out eventually, and we had a 10, 15-year relationship working on projects where I provided, my crew provided the artwork for, this is a little bleached out, this type of, for churches and mostly churches. I became known in the industry as a cloud guy. This is in the state capitol in Des Moines, Iowa. And I was hired by Evergreen, now Evergreen Architectural Arts. You're looking from the floor up to the dome. It's probably well over, I'm guessing, 100 feet up there. The scaffold was across this opening, and you're looking through this gold dome, which has an opening where the ceiling is probably another 10 feet higher. So we had a flat scaffolding running across, and then I worked off of rolling staging. Often in the case, and I'm no exception, when hired on something like this, I would have assistants, one or two other people. In this case, I had one other gentleman working with me. When I had my own business, I had as many as 7 artists working with me, so this is a group effort. It's a very traditional means of getting these things done. I mean, you only have to think back in Italy with all the fresco work. If you read anything about, what is Michelangelo's book? I forget what it's titled, but you learn Ghirlandaio, who hired him, had a crew of probably about 5 assistants. So it's a very time-honored means of working collaboratively. Same shot. And then they hung this flag and all the dates across on guy wires. But that was a fun project to do. This led to another job. I was responsible for the clouds. This is Bass Hall down in Fort Worth, Texas. This was a new construction. 2 brothers designed this, the Getling brothers, and they hired Evergreen Architectural Arts to supply the artists to get their design up onto the ceiling. And again, there was a scaffold going across. Lower down where the wings are was done by another crew, and same thing, scaffolded. You're probably, again, 100 feet up here. So you're cognizant of the fact that underneath you is 100 feet of empty air, but you're safely on 1/4-inch plywood. So, although I have to admit, when you're working, and if you step back over another piece that's laying over one, that 1/4-inch that you suddenly step on in your mind becomes 100 feet, and your heart leaps through your mouth. So it can be a rather eye-opening experience. This is a small skyscape done, it's probably 6 feet across, and more in a residence over a dining room setting. The chandelier would hang where you're seeing a light bulb. Again, I've studied and painted clouds. They're fascinating to me both in this, what I'll call decorative application, as they are in my own paintings. And this led from that State House ceiling you saw. This was St. Rocco's. And this is a church in Johnston, Rhode Island, actually only 20 minutes from where I live currently. I was hired by the paint company in the church to decorate the entire ceiling, not all the gold work though, that's 18 karat gold that you're seeing that was applied to raised plaster work. We provided, my crew and I, all the inset ornament that you see. We painted the cloudscape on site. We painted the 3 angel figures in the studio, and you'll see in photographs coming up how we accomplished that. And then St. Rocco, and of course his dog, he's ascending to heaven. And we borrowed the one angel from Tiepolo. The other one in the lower right is my second cousin Kyle, who I had posed on a ladder, and I took a picture of him. And I can't remember, we borrowed the other angel from some other resource. We made St. Rocco up, but we did a lot of research on him. And so this was year 2000, and this is an interesting footnote down the road. You will see more work that I did in 2017 in this church. This church, when you walk in, one, it's a Catholic church. It has a very active parish. The inside feels very much as though you're in Italy at any of, big Italian church. And they built this, I believe, in the 1930s, but had no money to decorate it. So for years, what you saw up here, and I unfortunately don't have a before picture, was simply painted a solid color. And they had put soundproofing material in what is the painted sky, which looked like a carpet upside down in the center of the ceiling. They're very happy with the work that's been done with respect to this project. This is another one, St. Mary's in Cranston, Rhode Island. Mary and the angels are all painted on canvas. And I'll show you the shot coming up, how these things are scaffolded. The interesting thing with that is when you're working off the scaffold, sometimes the lighting is not what it will be ultimately when the scaffold comes down. So there's a little bit of guessing that you have to do, or anticipating what the situation will eventually be light-wise. Because you don't have opportunity, obviously, to reset the scaffolding and fix anything. So work like this, as I mentioned, very process-oriented, but you have to recognize that you better be sure of what you're doing, because come the time that scaffolding comes down, what's up there is going to be there for a long, long time. With the painting company, my crew also in this, painted all of the columns to look like they were marble. All of the pilasters aside the saints below the mural, again, all hand-painted marble. The archway is all marble. Up in the very top of the ceiling, you'll see just a little bit of a mural piece, and I'll have a shot showing. Down the nave, there we did a series of cycles showing the life of Mary. And there's one there, the Pietà. Of course, we started and ended up with the Pietà. And this shows you, we alternated between a simple decorative motif, and then we had the series of interesting aspects of Mary's life. We also provided between the arches, you see small circles that those have all of the 12 saints depicted. So when doing projects like this, you're not reinventing the wheel. There's a lot of tradition. The research is following tradition. They work typically with a priest or a small committee to get approval for design concept, and go from there. Here's a shot, a little bit close up of Mary. Here's Mary in the studio. So, paint her here, cut her out, glue her up with wallpaper paste, heavyweight, And there she is. You can see to the left a portion of that decorative motif that alternated between Mary's life, and then to the right is a smaller version. A lot of these things, I'll do the design work, say, or oversee an assistant doing design work. In this case, I did design this motif. I had a crew of people working on it, one artist in particular, so we kept the same hand. What was also interesting was the scaffold did not run the length of the nave. The scaffolding covered about 2 naves, and then once that was done, it was lowered or dismantled to a certain portion, and then rolled, they removed the pews, rolled to the next series of arches. So we were on a very tight schedule, meaning we had to ensure that the 2 paintings, one Life of Mary and the motif, were done because that scaffolding was going to move. The interesting thing with this is that you start to learn you've got to put a time factor to practically everything that you're doing. So you start to, you bid jobs on that, you time track that with your employees, and this ensures that the job is going to be profitable, and then you'll meet a timeline, and that starts to inform you with how you work. You don't have the luxury of, gee, I don't feel particularly artistic today. That doesn't enter the factor. This project was another Richard Haas. This is up in Boston. It's 101 Merrimack Street. It's a office building. We are in the lobby. The lower part of the left that's tipped is what's called the elevator wall. On the other inside of that wall, the other side is all the elevator, for each floor. So they had a large blank wall. They commissioned Richard Haas to design something. He came up with the concept of being in the inside of a Victorian, what do they call that, where they would grow plants?
Arboretum?
What was that?
Arboretum?
Something like that, yeah. I don't know if that's quite the word I'm looking for. That's close enough. I'll pat myself on the back. I took his concepts were terrific, brilliant man. He himself, his drawing skills were not necessarily up to the level that you would need for this type of project. He's, in our relationship, realized I had those skills, so I created the scale rendering of this for him, and that led the project. Obviously, he had input as the designer. And much to the chagrin or anger of his studio assistants in New York City, he signed my name to the what they call the maquette. I thought that was pretty interesting. While this mural, there was a staging that ran up and down, like you'll see on the exterior of a building. So myself and an assistant worked the wall, while another staging, they lowered cables from the ceiling through, you might see small dark holes in the ceiling at certain places. They would lower the cable down and attach it to the staging and rise it up so they could, in this case, most of what you're looking on the ceiling was painted canvas and glued to the ceiling. And so that was their primary function. And these jobs, such as this, and the other ones that you saw, could be 2 or 3 months. So in this, I just commuted up to Boston, and the others, of course, I lived out in that city for 3.5 months. It was a great way to get to learn about different parts of the United States. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Now this is a before shot. This is Jesus Savior down in Middletown, Rhode Island. We had done work in this church. You can, very small amount initially. You can see if you look at the windows, there's a little bit of an eyebrow there that was painted. Very simple. Scaffolding was up. I had a crew of artists go down and do this. The priest wanted me to fix this mural, and this is what he wanted me to do. The figure of Christ was the existing figure. He thought the clouds were too dark. He wanted to lighten it up, and I cautioned him. I said, Father, if I lighten it up, you're not going to have any values with it, in order to have the light masses read. And well, he didn't care. He looked at this for 15 years, and then he called me, and I did this for him. That's a little bit different. So this obviously is the Ascension, and quite dramatic. Most of what you're seeing as cloudscape is painted on site. The figure of Christ and the lower angel groupings are painted in the studio. This gives you an idea of how, as I mentioned, staging. Very difficult lighting. You're trying to anticipate what you're going to see at the end of the project. Here we've got Christ on the wall in the studio. I simply cut him out and with a razor, trim all the way around the contour, and then I have what I need to glue up onto wherever we're placing it. And there you can see in the studio, the groupings of the figure of the angels are underway. Here I'm trimming them out, and this is the other grouping underway. You can see photographs. I'm looking at artists such as Bouguereau or any other, anything that can help me along the way. I'm looking in the lower right. You can see I did a small painted study of what I thought I wanted to do. Here, Kyle, my assistant, is helping. You can see the angels in front of him, or the ones from the studio glued up. He's working on a series of angelic figures that we borrowed from our friend Titian, from the Ascension, I believe, the mural that he did of Mary, that I think, as much as we love it, the group, I think it was the Jesuits, weren't quite pleased with it back in the day, but time has proven them wrong. And then you can see there's Christ. And
Where's the saint up in the sky?
this is another project, Blessed Sacrament, in Providence. This is a wonderful copy of Raphael's Disputa, painted well over 100 years ago. And I could verify it probably came from France. And I had close-up shots. It was done in a series of pieces glued to the ceiling. And then over the ensuing 100 years, probably as every 30-year interior paint cycle, the murals would perhaps, they got a little dark. Rather than cleaning them, restoring them, they would hire an artist who would hand touch them and bring them out. And it was brutal work that was on top. Fortunately, we've got good online sources where you could find the original Disputa, so I was able to bring all of the mural back to its former glory. On the side of the baldacchino, in the center of the apse, you see below there's around the windows a landscape, and then below that is a series of figures from the Bible with palm trees. Those have been painted completely out. The company that I worked with was able to strip the paint back, and we were able to hand touch these and bring them back again to their former glory. My company and I won an award from the Historic Preservation Society of Providence for this work.
I got married in that church.
Did you? Yeah. They were thinking at one time this was going to be the Cathedral of Providence before they decided to build the cathedral. We did the painting around the rosette window, the ornament, and the window above. There was existing ornament on either side of that rosette, was the existing artwork that had fortunately not been painted out. And I have a close-up of the windows on the nave that I'll show you what we did there. But here's a little bit better shot of the mural. And again, it was a lot of fun to bring it back to the condition. There were certain elements that the clouds around God and the angels, if you look at the original Disputa, there's an emanation, I believe, of what's probably gold leaf of some sort in Raphael's work. We didn't have budget for that, so this is what they got. All right, here, not a great shot, but here down the nave, you've got this window. Below the window is artwork that was still in existence, done probably in the inception of the church. So we decided to work with it. We did tile work around this ornament. You can see it's just yellow. I have better shots. Then look at the window itself. Here, there's nothing around the stained glass window. Here, we painted a trompe l'oeil plaster ornament to encase the window in and bring some weight to that and tie it into the other plaster work of the church. There were these columns between the windows. Same thing here. You see inside it was pink. We carried these, and I have a better shot, you'll see, of the tile work. Actually underneath the arches in the side aisles, you also see tile work. Here's a shot. This is what was on the ceiling in those side aisles, and this shows you the effectiveness of the tile work. Brought a lot of grace back to the interior of the structure. This was a residential job I did down in Narragansett, and I did a whole series of other things. This was just the mural. The client was very interested in having something having to do with Rhode Island. We finally settled on the America's Cup yachts. There's the Newport Bridge. I forget the name of the little island with the house on it, but we're in Newport Harbor. So this is a final shot of the project. This is another final shot. This you can see from the living room. And here it is in the studio. And one of the critical elements with these projects, of course, is to make sure I get my measurements correct, because as you can see on the right side and left side, there's doorways. So I've got to make sure that this thing's going to fit. Measurement is critical when you're doing murals that are going to be installed in architectural settings. You can't afford to be too small or too big for that matter, and perhaps crop important aspects of the picture away. And you can see I've got my little cloud, photographs taped to the mural there. So, my reference, you always have to have a reference. Lower left is, the computer generated art that I did. I used the Photoshop program for a lot of the design work. It accelerates the process. It's a great tool. Here we are, earlier phase. I happen to have this studio. I'm not there anymore. I was on the second floor of a Betty's store in Cranston, Rhode Island. I had 4,000 square feet. They charged me $500 a month. I was able to create 2 mural walls, 10 feet high by 50 feet long in this large room, which was great because most of the time when you're in a mill building, what you've got along the ceiling is, air duct work, plumbing of any kind. So this was a terrific space. I left that space in 2015. I built a barn on my property. We've got an 18th century property. And so the outside looks like a barn, the inside, second floor is a studio, a little bit smaller. But I'm 5 minutes, or not 5 minutes, I'm half a minute away from my studio in the morning. It's not a bad commute.
Harley, is that oil paint?
This one is in oil. I'll work in oil or acrylic or whatever is necessary, but because of the blending, I want this to be oil.
And then do you varnish it?
And here I am varnishing on the side.
And I didn't know whether it cracked, roll it up or down.
No, what's interesting about paint, both acrylic and oil, and you'll see a picture, it's incredibly flexible when it's brand new. It does get brittle with time. And I've had this where I've done maybe samples, rolled them up, 10 years later, I unroll them, and the paint cracks. Yeah. So, but these are not going to be rolled or unrolled, at any point. So here I am varnishing it with a low gloss varnish because, of course, right behind me is the entryway, and we didn't want to have a lot of glare on the mural. So I roll it out, and then I brush it out as I go.
Did you use the same media on the Haas paintings?
No, that was an exterior paint called Farben from Germany. It's what's called a water glass paint. I'm not sure why, but it is a water-based. It's made specifically for porous surfaces, exterior surfaces. I don't know how much everybody knows of Europe, but there's traditions a lot in Germany of decorating the facades of the fronts of their commercial and buildings, houses. I mean, going back. This paint was developed in the mid-19th century, very expensive, but it's color fast for 40 or 50 years or more. I think they say 90 to 100. But what happens is typically the substrate deteriorates before the paint. The Haas mural is the first one you saw. This was an eye-opener. It was restored by the Haas is still alive, but they hired another artist. I'm not doing that kind of work these days. I wouldn't want it, but they had to repaint it back to its former glory because it was suffering a lot of substrate deterioration. It's made me realize I have more of my artistic life behind me than in front of me. It was like 35 years ago when that project was done. So this is a very common, for years I was in a mill building working for the design firm, the Morris Nathanson design firm, which is no longer in business, in Pawtucket. And we provided them with any interior mural that they needed for any kind of hospitality project. We did work for the Royal Caribbean, restaurants in the Royal Caribbean, standalone restaurants, restaurant chains. This was a Chinese restaurant in New York City called Mama Goose. And all of this was done on muslin. In this application, I don't use heavy canvas, I use muslin, which I obtained from outlets now in New Jersey that supply Broadway and off-Broadway for their scenic work. And I purchase it fireproofed. And what we do, and I do have shots inside the wall to show you the process of putting up the muslin and going from there. So this is a second shot. With these, we're looking, the desire from the designer was interested in looking at poster art from the 1930s and grabbing that stylistically. That diving board is gypped from a poster of that era. And basically, we've collaged things together to make an appealing backdrop for the restaurant patrons. And here's another shot showing the full length of the job. I think that's Madame Shanghai Chef. I'm not quite sure. It's been a number of years since I designed this. Here's another one, Harley's, Upper West Side. Now we were looking here at the comic book art, the MAGA comic book art, I think they call it. And again, with these projects, the designers typically are setting a tone and coming to me with their concept and ideas. Like an illustrator, I take that and create a design and work with them on any modifications. And ultimately then, once approved, we start the painting process. In a job like this, I would design it, and I did a small amount of painting. Typically, I'll come along on something like this near the tail end. But this is an easy project that anybody in the studio with any kind of level of skills would be able to manage. We also, in this case, did these hanging ceiling panels you can see, which were done for soundproofing. They're all on canvas. So this is the kind of situation you get yourself involved with when working commercially. This is another shot of the restaurant. With some of these, as far as I know, this restaurant is still up, but 10 years in, they typically go through a redesign. So many projects I've done have long disappeared. And there's a shot again of the main dining room with Ollie's. Here's one. I apologize for the quality of the shot. This was in Delmonico's in New York City. And they, again, large mural, they wanted something to just reinforce the sophistication of the location. So what's funny about this is, and I had gotten a sign off from a film production company because they said they'd be filming here, and I forgot all about it. Well, my wife and I were watching an episode of Blue Bloods, and here's Tom Selleck sitting in the dining room. Guess what was behind him? Huh? My wife and I at the same time, hey! And I had done work in the bar. I got a photograph of that, but he was on the phone in the bar, and there was a soffit mural. It's like, look, look at that. Because that happens once in a while. That's, a little bit of an ego boost, kind of fun. But I wanted to pull this in to show you. And these are just run-of-the-mill commercial jobs, nightclub in the Boston area. We did a ceiling mural over the dance floor. It was a challenge because the lamps themselves weren't up, but all of the hardware was, so we had to install around it on It wasn't scaffolding, we were on a scissors lift, me and the assistant, and we did this in a series of panels, but a lot of times logistically, there's challenges presented in front of you as far as how to get the goods up, I could say. This was another similar scenario. You can see that circular oval ceiling ornament that was painted in the studio and then installed on site. This was an interesting project done for Jackson Creative Group. It's the Steelworks restaurant in what was the Sands Casino, now Wind Creek, in the old Bethlehem Steel Works campus. So the theme, obviously, was based on steel. So what you're seeing to the right and center, to the right of the picture, is the mural done in the studio. The same mural here this is on the studio wall in the process of being painted. Here it's under further development. This is acrylic on canvas. This is another portion of the mural. This was a lot of fun to paint. And there I am, painting away in the, I was holding the phone. This is when phones were new, I think. I got a kick out of doing this myself. This shows you the front. Look at the crease up there at the top, right? The installation crew's got the mural. Paint is very flexible at this point. What you typically do, you see clear plastic over it. When ready to take it down, you cover the mural with this clear plastic. One of the purposes is typically, sometimes in this muslin, especially if it's lightweight, the gesso, acrylic gesso, will work its way through to the back. And if you don't put the plastic and you roll it up, little bits of gesso will electrostatically cling to the painted face of the mural, and it's a real bear to get off. After that, so you've gone through just one of those, you never not put plastic up, I'll assure you. Here's the crew installing, and you can see between them, just on the scaffold, the baker, there's a little bit of a sag in the mural there, again, showing you how flexible the surface is. Now what he's going to do is probably pull the bottom out, work that out, and then take the smoothing tool and work the crease out, or the bubble, as it were. There's the mural all cut and installed. This will be eventually a seating area. This is another room, long dining room. Here, that same mural in the studio. We're outside in the casino looking at the top part of that signage that you saw. To the left is that mural now in the completed restaurant. I was able to grab this from the design firm's website, and it just shows you the function of a mural like this. It's not center, its job is to reinforce, it's passive, it's background, it's not wallpaper, but it's not a standalone easel painting demanding attention. It lends itself to supporting the theme of the restaurant and or seating areas. Same thing with this one. This is down in New Jersey. This is the, what do they call it? The Office Tavern and Grill, of which they have a series. This is in Summit, New Jersey, which just so happens to be along the commuter line from Manhattan. So, what to do? Theme, I thought, let's make something, railroady, which I happen to be a train fanatic, so I had great fun with this. One of the things not evident in this mural, which is a lot of fun, I'm canvassing on the wall, and I took acrylic modeling paste and very aggressively applied it to the surface, giving a highly textured surface. I then projected the imagery, drew it out in charcoal, and then proceeded to paint. Because of that textured surface, it gives the idea to the viewer that a tremendous amount of work took place in order to get this work done. That's anything but the case. It's a little bit of live cheating and stealing, but you get away with it when you can, especially when it produces a superior result. This is a mural down in Foxwoods, down in the conference area. This is a sitting lounge outside the conference rooms. A rare application where they asked me to do something that was similar to the kind of painting that I would do. This is, common of a coastal landscape marsh scene that I might have done now blown up to mural size. This is hard to see. I do have a better shot coming up, but you can see there's a slightly light oval that's a soffit mural. Has to do with, this is in Scottsdale, Arizona. It has all cowboy theming. This is the Capitol Grill. This is another Capitol Grill up top. This is Chicago, Illinois. This mural that you see was in 3 main pieces. The centerpiece that you're seeing there was the main trading room where the commodities were traded. I found a historic print of that, and then on either side had to do with industry and trade of the greater Chicago area. Obviously, the Capitol Grill, that was a theme. I don't have a picture, but I was just here about 4 weeks ago having a meal because I did a Capitol Grill installation in Schaumburg outside of Chicago. They've changed the theme. This theme that was evolved in the 1990s, maybe the late 80s for the Capitol Grill was that they wanted it to look like an old men's club that you would go to and smoke cigars and that kind of thing. Darden bought the brand in, I think, 2008, maybe 2010, and they did one of those surveys, outreach surveys, and they discovered that most of their client base was corporate people, and men would go there, but corporate women wouldn't because they felt this was a men's place. So they've changed up the whole look. All those little oil paintings you see down below are gone. They've simplified the look, but what they've done now is, and over the years, they had portraits done in these locations of capitalists, or very serious looking. Then it evolved into portraits of famous people, politicians, sports figures, and the like. They got rid of the portraits in 2015, went to totally abstract paintings, which I was happy to pay for them. They went back to portraits, and we're on portraits now that are very contemporary and jazzy looking. A lot of fun, a lot of work. I didn't bring a lot of those because I've got plenty of other things to show you, but Capitol Grill has been a long-standing account. The rare thing is that I'm working directly with the corporate entity rather than the design company. And I do more now with the choice of artwork put in locations. I paint the work and then I oversee the installation. In this situation, when I had lunch, I was sitting at the bar and I was taking pictures, and I mentioned to the hostess and the bartender that I was the artist who did this work. They proceeded to tell the manager, who came over, and we had a wonderful time talking. And I said to her, I thought that the mural was going to be taken down. And she said, they were going to paint over it. And she says, I have an art degree from college. And I told them, that's a great piece of art, don't you dare. So they didn't. So I thanked her profusely. And then she proceeded to underwrite the cost of my lunch from their location. I thought, terrific. But it was, it's kind of cool when you go to these places and they're able to put a face to who did the work, because I don't typically sign it. I'm the anonymous maker of the work. Up it goes. Nobody knows who did it or how. Local Rhode Island restaurant on the east side, spats. You can see the main figure has spats on, shoes, a lot of kind of abstracted elements. But it was funny. I went to the location a few years after this mural was done. He had complained to the designer, oh, this guy's awfully expensive, so on and so forth. And I am. He had hired local RISD students. You all know RISD, the art school. And he had all these paintings all over that they had basically gypped the imagery, to make copies. I thought, that's fine. I'm flattered. Now, you see 2 paintings, lower side. Again, I'll do anything. This is for a country club in New Jersey through the Judd Brown design firm. You can't tell, but that's a silver metallic surface. The yellow also has a metallic quality to it. Very hard to pick up on that in the photograph. And in the same country club, here's a series of 3, a triptych of an abstraction that was done under the direction of the design firm. They wanted somewhat of a nautical feel. A lot of fun. Acrylic on canvas. Roll it up, take it to the framer. They stretch it, frame it, I'm done. And I think, well, what happened here? Well, if you look at the ceiling, see how it's coffered? All of those coffers are painted squares of canvas to give the illusion of depth. So that is not a coffered ceiling in reality. It's an illusionary coffered ceiling. A lot cheaper to do it painted than if that had to be done in true plaster work. This is the Quidnesset Country Club in Quidnesset, Rhode Island. There's a better shot of that mural that we saw earlier. You can sort of see it. Again, a lot of, this is stuff that I learned from Richard Haas, a lot of nice ornament having to do with the locale. There's cowboys and Indians in the center of the picture, so it's fun stuff to do. Here's another country club, a floral above the fireplace. I'm doing mostly this type of work now rather than exteriors of buildings or murals applied to the wall. Most, if not all, that I'm doing commercially are standalone paintings, either for country clubs or restaurants. Here's a series of watercolors done, and these watercolors were just historic. They had provided historic pictures of the golf course. I made watercolors of them, and they grace a private dining room. What's kind of cool is obviously this whole ensemble is put together by a design firm. So I'm a small integral part of it. I'm part of the decor team. Same Capitol Grill we saw in Chicago. Upper left, you see another portion of that mural. And this is in Manhattan, again, over bar mural. We haven't done many murals for Capitol Grill since, 10 years, but the center, the eagle and the American flag was a recurring theme that I would work in every mural, which was a lot of fun. This was a local Rhode Island restaurant, Chapel Grill in Cranston. You can certainly see the mural above the bar. The reason for the theme of the mural was the Garden City was developed on an old farm. They wanted a bucolic rural imagery, so that's what I provided. This is actually a backdrop painted in the way that you would do a backdrop for a play or Broadway. This was in a restaurant, it currently exists, I believe, up in Hingham. One of the first restaurants I did in like 1990, with Morris Nathanson Design, 1992 or 3. And now, it's Italian, what do they want? I've got to do a copy of Michelangelo, Godfather reaching out to Adam. I was a little concerned about this. It's an artifact. I made it with styrofoam, covered it with that wall mud that you use. I was always concerned it would fall off the wall. I visited there maybe 2 years ago, it's still there, so I must have done something right. And there's Tosca herself, one of the Broadway divas who portrayed Tosca. Now this is a before shot, St. Mary's in Bristol, Rhode Island. Working with a paint company, and we uncovered stencil designs and replicated the artwork on the ceiling. This was a pretty significant job. This shows you the apse on either side of the baldacchino. This is an after shot. We did artwork up above the arches that you can see. I have detailed shots of that. Artwork went up around the windows. We painted putai heads up in the cloudscape in the ceiling and various other ornament throughout the nave. This piece here was based on, they had a stencil in this location in the church of this design. I decided that we would make this into a full form scroll ornament. And so we painted 1, 2, 3, 4, I believe 5 of these. Well, I painted the sample and then proceeded to have my crew paint these. And then you see in this photograph, the right side has the pounce pattern of those, back up here. Yeah, you can see on the right side running up with the white cross. This is the pattern. I created the pattern, and then we burn along the lines with what's called a pounce machine on a 4x8 sheet of sheet metal, and you have a pencil, and a current runs through the pencil and burns little holes. Back in Michelangelo's day, they punctured each hole individually. Probably some 12-year-old kid was in the basement busy punching these holes, and that's how he started his career as a mural painter. On the extreme left side, you also see part of the pounce pattern for this scroll ornament that was used to apply to the canvas for each of that 5 scroll patterns that were created. This was a private chapel that I did in a home in Cranston. Obviously the Holy Spirit, Alpha Omega above. Below is a copy of Bloch, is Christ, and then the angels, I believe, are from a painting from Bouguereau. These are, let's see, we have Joseph at the top, Peter or Paul in the middle, and then Elijah at the bottom, and then Mary, and that's the same Mary. I borrowed her again from that other one. You have Peter or Paul, and then Moses at the bottom. Here we've got Mary and the Christ in another chapel, private chapel. I love the above and below ornament. You'll see that style done in Italy. Artists specialized in this. So an artist like Tiepolo wouldn't paint this ornament around his fresco murals. He'd hire a whole different company, or a whole different company would be hired to design and execute. With this, let's see, that ornament's on gold leaf applied to canvas. The whitish ornament down below and above is acrylic on canvas, and then obviously the centerpiece is painted oil. The clients liked this painting. They chose this to be what they wanted for me to depict. This is St. Mary's in Attleboro, a lot of St. Mary's. What's interesting is the white portion you see, again, is all flat and trompe l'oeil. There's a diaper pattern stenciled on the wall, then we have the center ornament above. The gold ornament with a stencil work framing this, and then the whole church was wood grained by my crew to look like cherry wood. It was a big job. The interior was fabulous once it was done. This was St. Vartanants, an Armenian Apostolic Church, I believe, in Providence. And here's another risen Christ. It was sort of a tough space within which to work, but I managed to get Christ up there and the clouds painted. This is the studio that I spoke of earlier. So uncovered walls, canvases are up on both walls. Most of the time, all the furniture typically is movable or is on wheels. You can see in the back easels. At that time, I did a lot of my fine art painting in this studio. Here's the canvas going up. So you staple it up loosely over plastic. Once it's up, and you'll notice it's draped sort of loose because it shrinks. If you make it too tight, it'll want to pull the staples out and you'll be stuck. So you leave it somewhat loose. These are bad shots, but these are murals again by Richard Haas. This was when I started, 1992. This was the advent of my business beginning. So prior to that, I hired myself out as a contracting artist to other firms or studios. This was made under the direction of my studio, and I had a staff of 4 artist assistants working with me. This was out in Kansas City, Kansas. 2 facing murals in a federal building. The blue tile working, well, it was painted to look like fired tile. And the architectural work surrounding these standalone polychrome figures is what Richard Haas was intending. Has a very strong Art Deco quality to it. These little things that he paid attention to, I took to heart and learned from while executing my own designs. Now this is interesting. This is down, this mural. They had this very mural up, but it was beyond restoration. I said I could paint you a new, brand new mural, same composition. This is St. Augustine's in Newport, Rhode Island. This was 1995. What's fun about this is the apostles on the extreme left. The most extreme left was my business partner at the time. In front of him was a good friend of mine. And then the third guy from the left is me. So I don't know if I'm going to get in trouble from St. Joseph's when I go to heaven, if I go to heaven, but we have fun putting our own faces in now and then. What's interesting about this is, years later I bought a book on an artist who created plates of historic events, biblical events. Lo and behold, here's one of his plates. Gee, where did the original artist get his design from? This guy, right here. So it shows you don't always reinvent the wheel. You find resources where to glean from. You're not always having the time, the budget, or even maybe the creativity where somebody else has maybe made a better image than you would even find yourself. So here's the image, and there it is up on the wall. So I've learned from that. Here's when I still had hair. This is probably 1986. Very early job, but same thing. Look at the pattern. Now, here's a pattern book, upper right hand. Look at that pattern. The artist who I was restoring, this work was done originally in the late 1800s. I didn't find a pattern, but I managed to be pretty lucky in mimicking it without not a lot of resource, and there had that book, I wouldn't have had to bother. This is the, and we're getting near the end for anybody getting drowsy. This is St. Rocco's, the last church that I did in 2017. I did everything by my big self. I had no assistance. I did hire Kyle to come out from Western Massachusetts to help me install the murals. You're looking at the apse. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 murals there between real marble columns. Outside of the apse in the side aisles are 2 statues, one of Mary, one of Jesus. Behind them is a canvas depicting a niche. That is flat. That does not physically go into the wall. In fact, the priest told me after these were installed, a parishioner came up and asked him, when did we install those? Well, it's canvas. This ceiling, this is part of the ceiling we did 20 years earlier with my crew. There's Jesus and Mary. This was the priest, I think, who was at the church maybe when it was built, and this was the cardinal who was part of the founder of this particular, I can't remember what they call it, the Catholic Church, but the sect, much like the Jesuits. It's a separate branch. Here we are back at the ceiling. This is the before shot, right? There's the empty spaces. 20 years ago when we did the ceiling, this is what existed. Now what's interesting is, and this is the hand of God at work, you saw the private chapel that I showed you with the Holy Spirit. That's not too far from this location. I was going to pick up the final check for that. I happened to drive by St. Rocco's on my way home. I noticed a pickup truck from the painting firm that I did business with. I went inside and see what was going on. The church had suffered some paint damage. Well, Robert O'Donnell had been talking to the priest and basically trying to convince, and did convince the father, it was time to do something up in the apse. And so I got the job. What luck. I happened to stop by, walk in, came away with a substantial sized project. And this shows the murals in between the real columns. The priest picked out the saints to be depicted. That's Mother Teresa, and that's St. John Paul. And as we go, I want to show you also this idea of the concept of the niches and the artwork above came from another artist, Guido Nincuri. Guido Nincuri was an Italian artist who worked in French churches in Canada, Rhode Island, and Massachusetts. This is part of his St. Charles, Providence, that we didn't get the job, but I photographed it. I happened to have these on the file when I was thinking about what am I going to do for St. Rocco's. Bingo. I'm going to use the ornament that he created above the niche. I'm going to use the niche and the idea of the statue in the niche. And here was the concept that I utilized for St. Rocco. Now here is the canvas. It's been, the pounce pattern has been put up. What you're seeing is what we call the inking. I'm just taking a thin coat of paint with a fine brush, and I'm drawing out all of what had been transferred through the pounce pattern onto the canvas, so that I have a permanent, nothing is going to disappear. It's all permanent now, and I can work above it. And this shows you the pounce pattern. Now, oftentimes, I mentioned we would project the pattern generated, either drawn or what have you. When I finally gotten clever, and I work with a printing company when I need murals printed, I had them print the design from my computer onto the paper. The nice thing with that was, because it was going from computer to computer, there was no chance in the projection process that I would make a mistake and maybe have something skew off because of how I was projecting, that I wasn't square on. There we have Mother Teresa on the studio wall. Another thing, I had to learn how to letter. This is, again, Nincuri's ornament. You saw the ornament that I did earlier. I've taken cues from this guy. Really good. Here's the ornament pounce pattern. Here is it out in the studio. I had to paint 5 of these. 4 of them. The center panel didn't get one. What's interesting, this is production painting. You don't paint one beginning to finish and then go to the end. You paint each step. Roll the palette table down, and you do the next one, and then you do the next one, so on and so forth, until you've achieved your result. And then there they are up on the wall. This is the niche showing, again, and the ornament above. Again, there's the niche. Now what's interesting, earlier studio shot, there they are up on the wall. What's this to the left? Well, I had a Capital Grille abstract painting job concurrent to it. Shows you the interesting stuff that will be on a mural wall studio. It's not all the same stuff all the time, right? Now again, this is a crew. Behind them is a job we did Richard Haas, New York, Washington D.C. That's a statue of Columbus in front of the train station, I believe. It takes us a village to get the job done. Here's another assistant of mine, my relative, my cousin's son Kyle, who's an artist in his own right, working for me. There's Kyle again, St. Adalbert's, working a painting of Mary, making adjustments. Another crew member working on ornament. This is at Bass Hall you saw. There's the crew. The woman in the middle was the project manager. And we were all working in concert to get the job done. The guy at the lower left was my assistant on the clouds. And there I am on the clouds. Didn't have a scaffold. There I am at the Blessed Sacrament adjusting Raphael. And there I am on the side of the building painting Black Hawk. You better get used to heights if you're going to do these kind of jobs. And there he is. And that's it. I'll take any questions.
Thanks so much for the talk.
Sure.
So when you're painting sound panels for restaurants,
Yeah.
what kind of paint do you use to maintain the sound absorbing properties? Are there any paints that would reflect the sound?
I don't know how scientific we got where these were. They were just muslin painted with acrylic paint. They wrapped it around a frame. I'm guessing they worked.
Okay.
You know, yeah, I mean, it was my idea. It was a design firm. And they go, I'll do it. Here's the price. So, but you can look. Are you doing things along those lines? You're interested in it?
Yeah, I'm thinking about it.
All right, well,
Yeah.
Google, if you have your phone, put down Rose Brand.
Rose brand?
Yeah, rosebrand.com. They are the theatrical company I mentioned.
Okay.
They may have a product in their online catalog. You may even contact them, and if not them, they may give you leads to what, an entity that you might find. And then just Google, and you'll be astounded what's out
I don't
there.
think we'll be doing that.
Cool. Biggest thing if you're doing it for hospitality is you want to have it to be flame proof, and you want to have documentation to that effect. It doesn't always happen, but the fire marshal may want it, and or the client, so you want to have that in file to provide to them. And usually the provider can email it to you in a PDF form, easily print out.
You gesso it first before you paint it?
Most of the times, the only thing in here that wasn't gessoed interior was the Tosca that looked like a backdrop.
Yeah.
That was actually painted with theatric scenic paints, and all you do is starch it. And we did it on the floor. We put it out, and we had the bogus paper beneath, and we starched it, and it shrinks. And then you just apply water-based scenic paints in order to get it done. So that has no gesso to it. So, yeah. Well, okay. Well, thanks for coming.
Wait,
I hope you were entertained and nobody fell asleep. Yeah.
One more question?
Yes.
Do you have any tips for designing a stairwell?
A mural along the stairwell.
Yes.
I mean, again, the best thing you can do is Google that, go into images, and see what people have done. That's going to start generating ideas. Rather than looking at it as a blank space, go out and do research. There are a lot of great artists. Of course, I can't think of any of their names. Graham Russ. There was an English artist who did a lot of work for the wealthy in their big, palatial homes. And I think he even did a mural along those lines. He may come up, but is it going to have any flavor, meaning, like colonial time period, or no, is it open?
Abstract. Open.
Yeah, then, the one thing I would suggest is, from a design standpoint, if it might be impossible to get good photographs of it, then measure it and draw it to scale, the space. And typically, because I do a lot of design work in the computer, I'll throw that space into the computer where I can start playing around with ideas. And do you work with Photoshop at all?
Yes.
Yeah, so you can layer things, you can save the one you like, and so the nice thing with that, when I started out and Photoshop wasn't in existence, you had to do cut and paste, and then what you had to do is FedEx this out to the client. You had to also, you would lease a copy machine, was like $10,000 a year, and you had to hire the guy to come and fix it. So you put this together, you have to rush, and anybody who's in the graphic arts knows this dynamic. Rush it off, to the designer, and then they call you, oh, I like this, I don't like this, or you have to adjust again, set it up. Now in Photoshop, you do it, and then you email it to them. The downside of that is you can't lie and buy time anymore, because they know you can do it fast.
Maybe sometime you do a demonstration of your oil paintings.
Mm-hmm. I haven't, I've been backing away, I'm happy to, but what's happening in my life right now, because, and I mentioned, I'm involved in these projects now with Dart on the front end. I'm involved at Capital Grill, the Capital Burger, Seasons 52. So I'm on the front end of helping them choose art, but also designing the artwork for the interior and the placement of it. Then, once it's approved, I produce what I'm supposed to produce, artwork-wise. Then it gets shipped out, and I go out to the site to oversee the installation. The issue is, especially on the back end, it's a moving target. So I never know quite what my schedule is, so I hesitate to do a specific thing. So for all I know, I have to fly out to XYZville. Like, for example, this week I'm driving down to Florida because I have a bunch of business with galleries, but I'm overseeing an installation in Coral Gables. Now, another one popped up because of bad timing, not my fault, but I may have to, from Miami, while I'm down there, fly out to San Antonio to oversee another installation, fly back to Miami and get home by Easter, or my wife will kill me. So, that's what's happening, so I hesitate to plan anything with that in mind, demos and or workshops, because this commercial thing with me right now is, it's good because I'm making money, but it's very disruptive, if you kind of figure. So maybe I will, I absolutely will do someday, I can't guarantee when, but I'll probably ride this thing that I'm doing right now. I'm 63, maybe 4 or 5 years, and then I'll want to kick back and go more easy where I have a more open schedule. So,
That would be nice.
yeah.
Now, Harley, if you did a plan here, it's
Yeah.
9 by 12, and now you want to make it like 3 by 4 feet.
Yeah.
Do you do the same thing? Would you put it into?
Not necessarily.
Or just,
It depends on the nature, but I have been blowing, like I did a series of 1620s up in Vermont on site. I like them. I made them larger to 24-30. But as there was nothing specific architecturally, I was able just to lay them in, look at the other painting, block it in, and it's fine. Maybe if there was something specific architecturally, I might do some sort of transfer and a tracing onto white canvas to make sure I didn't have drawing issues. I don't want, with some stuff specifically. And I'll do that even with portraiture. It's sort of cheap. I can paint a portrait for life, no problem. These days, commissioned portrait, often you have to work with photographs. A lot of times I'll go into the computer, load the head up to scale, print it out, transfer it to tracing paper, draw the basic shapes out on the canvas. So I don't want to get into the middle of the painting and realize the eye is too low, the nose is a little too far to the right or left, and so on and so forth. It does, unfortunately, you're not going to get a sergeant-esque result based on that kind of approach. But that's the way it works, unfortunately. So I'm not going to get the governor of Rhode Island to sit for it, but he let me take his picture.
thank you.
Well, my pleasure. I hope you all enjoyed yourself. So,